بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. We've reached the 127th Hikma, this blessed collection of aphorisms of the great Imam Ibn Ata'illah al-Sikandari radiallahu ta'ala anhu wa nafa'ana bi'ulumihi fid darain. In this blessed aphorism, he teaches us something very important about the importance of breaking the norms of our souls, of our nafs. And it is by scholarly consensus that the greatest veil between a servant and his or her Lord is the nafs. By scholarly consensus. This is the greatest veil of all. There's all different types of veils. And there are thick veils and there are thin veils. There are thick veils of darkness and there's thin veils of light. But of all of the veils, the greatest veil of all between us and Allah Jalla Jalaluh is our own nafs. Our own nafs is also our greatest enemy. So in this aphorism, he teaches us something very important here. كيف تخرق لك الأوائد وأنت لم تخرق من نفسك الأوائد. This might translate, how will norms be broken for you when you have not broken the norms of your soul? So this is about breaking the norms of our souls. So let's look at this. Kaifa is, we form a question in here, how? تخرق. We have this word تخرق, مبني المجهول. The passive tense, خرق يخرق or خرق يخرق, is to tear or to pierce or to make a hole in. خرق. So here this idea of tearing, piercing, you translate here as breaking. So what is being broken here? لك الأوائد. So this word awa'id, is the plural of one of the plurals of ada. And ada is a norm, a custom. So it comes from the word ada yu'udu, which is to return. It's also the same word that we have for Eid, because it returns time and time again on the lunar calendar. And so our customs, our norms are the things that we do regularly. And so the idea of an ada here, in the plural, which is either adat, there's another plural, but then awa'id as it's used here, are things that repeat themselves. Okay, so here, the awa'id, the norms here, when we translate it as such, when we speak about it in this first usage, it refers to the laws of nature, the way that the world is. Okay, and so there's a way that things normally are. So if gravity is an example, that if I drop my phone is going to fall to the pillow. It's possible that I let go of my phone and it stays. That would be a breaking of the norm, because the norm is, unless it's something suspending in the air and I'm holding it up or there's something supporting it, it's going to fall. But I could let go, and Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala makes the phone stay right before everyone's eyes. Not magic or anything like that, like right before people's eyes, it stays. That's possible, okay? So the norms are the way that the world normally works, really the laws of nature, the realm of science. So what he's saying is, كيف تخلق العوائد? So how will the norms be broken for you? How can the laws of nature that be ruptured for you so that miracles result, as some of them translate it? وأنت, and you, لم تخرق. Okay, and you have not broken. Broken what? Min nafsika, from your own self, al-awaid. So the world in which we live has its norms. There's a way that the world normally functions. And then the nafs, the soul, the ego, the lower self, also has its norms. Yani, the way that the vast majority of people are, by virtue of living in the world. So what he's really getting at here is something very important. And the traveler on the path needs this, because oftentimes the travelers on the path hear these stories of the great people of Allah and what happens on their hands. And we sometimes are attracted to this. And we sometimes want to actually see this happen on our own hands. And these thoughts come to our mind and so forth. And what he's really teaching us here is as a servant of Allah. Because keep in mind, what was when we took the 125th and the 126th aphorism, we said this is really about being realized in our servitude. Okay? So when he said, since he has held you back from claiming attributes that you do not have, but which people have, do you think he will allow you to claim attributes that only belong to the Lord of the worlds? And the one before that, be attached to the attributes of his lordhood in realizing the attributes of your servanthood. So we should be much more concerned about what is transpiring internally. How are we with the norms, the awa'id of our own nufus, of our own selves? This is what we should really be focusing on. And it actually is a great fitna for someone. In the path, there's all different types of fitna. Here, probably best translated as tests. There'll be multiple tests. And one of the biggest tests is to become well known, is to be looked up to, is to attain status, is to be accepted by the people, is to have people praise you or congratulate you. This is one of the big tests, but there's many, many others. Then there's other tests that come as well. And someone actually might be tested with seeing a breaking of the norms happen on their hands. So the people of dunya, if someone wrongs them and they make dua against them, and then something bad happens to that person, a person of the dunya who doesn't know anything about the spiritual path, like, see, my dua was answered. Look what happened to that person. My dua was answered. A'udhu billah. How do you know that was your dua that was answered, first of all? Second of all, that's not the state of a heart of a righteous person. To, one, want something bad to happen to someone. Two, to think it was because of your dua. You're deluded. And that the people of this path, if they see a breaking of the norms happen on their hand, it's that they actually become very scared and worried. That it's what's called istidraj. That Allah Ta'ala is leading them astray. So they actually start to worry. It actually makes them fear more. And this is really another layer of this meaning. If someone in treading the spiritual path has these types of things happen, it actually is a test. Do we incline towards them? Do we think it's because of something that we've done? And are we impressed with ourselves? Do we then admire ourselves? Or do we do what we're supposed to do, which is focus on tahqiq al-ubudiyah, actualizing and realizing our servitude before Allah. And so, this is why the scholars of the science have always said, A'adhamul karama, the greatest karama. Inshallah, we'll speak soon about these different names that the scholars have given for the different categories of khawariq al-adat, breakings of the norms. And one of them is called a karama, as opposed to a mu'jiza. You can both roughly translate it as miracle, but a karama is a saintly miracle that happens on the hands of a righteous person. And the idea of it being a karama, it's a way of honoring this person and showing to people that that person's special. But the true people of Allah don't want these things to happen on their hands and hide them if they do. But the point here is that the greatest karama of all is istiqamah. The greatest karama is istiqamah. And it's rhyme prose in Arabic. But the greatest breaking of the norm is to be a person of uprightness. Why? Because you're breaking the norms of yourself. That is the affair in its entirety. It's learning to break the norms of the self. That first lowest state, which is the default state for the vast majority of people of the nafs of being ammara bisu, ever inciting to evil, is that you go against it. And this is essentially what this is about. So, this is something that can happen. And part of the reason it's mentioned here in the Hikam is because the people who actualize their servitude before Allah there is that power of the ruh that can come to the surface at times, and from the means of that, everything is from Allah Ta'ala. Amazing things can happen when the ruh starts to dominate over the body, because the ruh has a sultan to it, where that's what we want, is we want to be ruhaniyin, and is that we have our arwah, our spirits, overcome our body. And this is what we should strive towards. And the intellect's function, if you remember from the past retreat, is to give victory to the ruh over the nafs. And the more that the nafs takes over the heart, the less sultan the ruh has. The more that the ruh takes over the heart, the more pure the heart becomes, and the more purified the nafs becomes and moves up in degrees, until it eventually becomes mutma'inna and tranquil. And so it's in this context that he mentions this. And he says here, كَيْفَ تُخْرَقَ لَكَ الْأَوَائِدِ, how will norms be broken for you? وَأَنْتَ لَمْ تَخْرَقْ مِنْ نَفْسِكَ الْأَوَائِدِ, when you have not broken the norms of your soul. Now, the basic meaning, this simply means, أَيُّهَا الْمُرِيد, O seeker of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is that don't think that if there are karamat, breaking of the norms that happens on your hand, is that these are actually truly signs of your piety. That if you have not broken the norms of your own self, is that you're still in a bad state, si al-ahwal, and that you have what's called al-istirsal ma'a shahawat. You are just acting upon your desires without discretion. And he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is his adah, this is his way that he normally deals with creation, is that he will not cause norms to be broken for someone until someone ceases to have what are called hudud, these portions that the nafs seeks, the shares that the nafs seeks. In other words, is that we detach ourselves from the various things of this world. And so that if this happens while we're traveling the spiritual path, where there's something that appears to be a type of breaking of the norm of some sort, we should fear what is called istidraj. Istidraj. And istidraj is again where Allah Ta'ala leads someone astray because we've gone astray in of our own selves, in terms of our intentions, in terms of what it is that we are seeking. So when we go a little bit deeper, is that these awa'id, these norms, let's just call them, is that some authors, when they comment on this, they say they have two different classifications. There are the awa'id dhahira hissiya. There are the outward norms that are from the realm of the sensory. And there are the awa'id batina ma'nawiya. And there are the inner norms from the spiritual world. So then to give us an example of what this means, what are the awa'id al-hissiya, these outward norms of the external world? Like eating a lot, that drinking a lot, sleeping a lot, being overly focused on our appearance, our dress, our clothing, is that just mixing with anyone and everyone. So just being around people, not necessarily that being around people is always bad, but just without discretion. Just being around the wrong people, we all know, if you're around the wrong people, you're going to get yourself in trouble. And there's most vast majority of people, they end up doing what it is that their friends and the people that they associate with do. So this is a norm. وَالدُّخُولُ فِي الْأَسْبَابِ, entering into the means, having a career, having a livelihood, and so forth. وَكَثْرَةِ الْكَلَامِ, speaking often, and then everything that comes from that, argumentation and criticizing people, and a long list of other things. These are just all examples, and there's many. The things that customarily people fall into by virtue of being human beings, if they don't have a deen to regulate them. Now, Muslims themselves can fall into these too if they're that have deen, but their deen is not strong. if their iman is weak, if they don't have knowledge, if their intellect's not strong, even if they have knowledge to help them suppress and overcome their hawa, their desire. So there's a long list of things that are the awaid al-hissiyah, these norms. And it doesn't mean here to say is that bad behavior is the norm, but this is the tendency of the nafs, is to incline towards the things of this world and literally amara bisu, to incite us to evil. And for those that have associated with non-Muslims or at one point in their life were not Muslim, know that many of these things are commonplace, especially when people don't have much deen in their life. The way that they speak about other people, the things that they do, the type of food that they eat, the things that they wear, the choices that they make, what they say about people behind their backs, what they say about people to their face, the way they treat people. If you've been around people, this is one of the things that where Muslims can have such a great impact. You'd be surprised. Just in our normal interactions, meaning normal for us is adhering to this deen. It's not normal to other people. It's not normal. People are not used to being around people that don't backbite. People are not used to being around people that actually tell the truth and really want good for them without ulterior motives. People, let alone being around people of virtue. So even normal Muslims that might not even be on our scales even really practicing is so significantly higher than your average Tom or Carol or whoever you're speaking to in the English-speaking world of the United States of America or wherever someone lives. I should maybe use the name John, right? Or any, whatever the most used female name is, Elizabeth, who knows. Yeah, the point is that the standard is so much higher. It's so much higher. So there's a way that people normally are. And this doesn't mean that everybody's bad in society. There's stuff out there. Some people are better than others. And there are actually some very good people who don't do these types of things. But they're not the norm. They're not the norm. You go down to the local high school here and see people's language and just hear the way that they talk. It's very different than the way you're going to interact with someone in this blessed musalla or your average Muslim even. It's very, very different. See how people are speaking in their that lunches with their fellow employees at any company. And there's different degrees in which people speak. But the point here is that there's a normal way that many human beings are. This first category are the awaid al-hissiyah. These are the outward norms that relate to that physical realm. But then we have the inner norms of the spiritual realm. So the norms are hubbajad, the vast majority of people that want to be famous. Is that not true? The vast majority of people in the world want to be famous. The vast majority of people in the world would do anything actually to get their 10 or 15 minutes of fame. This is a norm amongst human beings, and that we actually even subscribe to magazines like People and GQ and who knows what people are subscribing. I'm out of touch now. These might be a whole bunch of new magazines that people that read, and the magazine is called People, and it's just about people. And there's actually people that really base their lives off of what the new fashion is, and will actually throw their clothes away or give their clothes away or something. Like every season they have to get a whole new wardrobe. Right? Look at the beauty of the sunnah. It transcends time and place, khalas, and all the different cultural manifestations of the sunnah and all the different places that the deen of Islam spreads. But this is a natural tendency in the human being to want to be famous, that riyasa, to want to be in charge, to want to be a leader, to want to be the one people point their fingers to. And that the natural state of the human being is to love the dunya. So if someone gave you right now just as a gift $100,000, how happy would everybody be? There's people who cheat family members out of significantly smaller amounts of money. There's people who will put a hit on you for even a smaller amount of money. The things that people do for even small amounts of dunya, let alone large. So if someone, and just all of us in this room, If someone just gave you $100,000, would you not be happy? It'd be like one of the best days of your life. You would exert joy that like you've never exerted for in your life. Imagine being like one of the righteous where that wouldn't move you at all. And you actually, instead of becoming happy, actually become very worried. And see it as a test from Allah Ta'ala. And there's people, like these are people that I've met who were given 1 million Saudi riyals, which is roughly $300,000 as a gift. It was for him. And immediately he got in the car with his driver and he said, go to here, go to there. From after Asr, I believe, until night. And then when they were done distributing the money, he held up the bag and said, Allahumma fashhad. Oh Allah, bear witness. He didn't keep a single riyal for his own self. He was given the money and he passed it all out. He distributed. Who would do that? That money was for us. Who would do that? And he might have even had needs in his own home. So there's people like this that exist. They're obviously few and far between. These are the people of Allah Ta'ala. But the point here is to paint this picture of these are the norms. And these are as a part of the internal world of the spirit. Is that people like to be praised. Who doesn't like to be praised? You have to fight against yourself. We love to be praised. If you get praised, like, oh, you just feel so good. Or that people find out that you're a good student, or people that find out that you're actually worshiping, find out that certain things that you did, we get happy. This is all from the internal norms, just as the norms and the tendency of human beings to have arrogance, the tendency of the human beings to have ujub, self-admiration, the tendency of the human being to show off, to desire what people have, fear of poverty, being worried about our sustenance, being hard-hearted, and so forth and so on. They go on and on and on and on. These are all the inward norms of the human being. Meaning, we might have all of them, most of them. Very few people have only a few of them. Most people have the majority of them. Because these are norms. So what he's saying is, how can saintly miracles happen on our hands when outwardly and inwardly, this is our state? These norms are our state. And this is what he's trying to teach us is like, this is really what we have to be focused on. Or breaking these norms. To reestablish a correct religious, spiritual relationship with food. Which begins with eating halal food. And then all the different dimensions of tayyib food. And then how we, in all the etiquettes that are associated with it, and so forth and so on. And change our relationship with how we drink. Change our relationship with sleep. Change our relationship with our clothes. Change our relationship with people. Change our relationship with career. Change our relationship with how we speak. Change our relationship and how we deal with people. And even for those who are doing good, change our relationship and how we're doing good deeds, how we're studying, how we are doing all different acts of worship even. This is what he's really calling us to. And likewise internally, is that change our relationship in terms of what are we really seeking? Whose approval are we really going after? What should be our relationship? The dunya is not worth loving. That love of the world and love of Allah are opposites. Is that the more you have of one, the less that you have of the other. And so forth and so on. Replacing the vices with virtues. And so forth and so on. This is the essence of the spiritual path. This is the spiritual path. And this is why it's so hard. Because we have to have the courage to confront our own selves. Now, one of the blessings is, we have a month coming up very soon, just a few days, where in this month, we can't blame it even on shaitan. Shaitan, the shayateen are chained up, and there's a difference opinion about what that means, about the shayateen being chained up. But essentially what it means is, we're left to our own selves. And you explain bad action in Ramadan from the remnants of us getting used to following the wasawis of shaitan. When he stokes up our egos against our own selves, we just get used to it. So we can't blame shaitan anymore in Ramadan. Now we have nothing other than to blame our own selves. So we get to confront ourselves in Ramadan. Allah. And then we're cutting back on our food intake. We're cutting back on what we drink. And this is why if we're going to move up in the degrees of fasting, is that there's other things we also have to cut back on as well. We should be cutting back on our sleep a little bit. We should be very careful on how much we eat after we break our fast. We should especially guard our eyes, especially guard our ears, especially guard our tongues in this blessed month. This is the ideal month. This is the month of all months. This is the greatest madrasa and way of all for us to confront our own selves and break the norms of the self in a way that's so powerful and so strong that post-Ramadan we're changed. We don't go back to the sign of qabul, of acceptance in Ramadan, is post-Ramadan we're changed. And to the degree that we've become changed is to the degree that inshallah that was accepted and that we'll receive reward for it. So what he's saying here is that, and now he's going to speak about each of these two categories. So the righteous say, فَمَنْ خَرَقَ مِنْ نَفْسِهِ أَوَائِدِهَا الْحِسِّيَّةِ. So anyone who breaks the norms of his or her own self, the physical norms of the realm of the sensory, through what? بِرِيَاضَاتِ الْقَهْرِيَّةِ. By forcing yourself to become disciplined. There's no other way to do it. Is that if you've ever seen someone train a horse, if you've ever seen someone that there's no other way to do it except to force it upon yourself. That's why I use the word qahriya. You force yourself to become disciplined. And you do so by relying upon Allah Ta'ala and using your faculty of anger to direct it towards self-control. If you do this, he says what happens is, i.e., you change your relationship with all those things that were mentioned outwardly, such that you do it with religious guidance and with the proper adab and with the proper etiquettes, in moderation, with the right intentions, and everything else that needs to be considered. What happens is that Allah Ta'ala eventually will put you in a situation where there's breaking of the norms outwardly for you. And there's a long list of things that might happen. You could see examples of your prayers being accepted, that it might be that you hear things that other people don't hear, that there are awliya that can do things that other people don't do. And there's long lists of breaking of the norms outwardly. And these are called karamat hissiya. These are saintly miracles that appear outwardly. And he said, in those who break the norms of the self that relate to the internal world of the spirit, خَرَقَتْ لَهُ الْعَوَائِدْ أو خُرِقَتْ الْعَوَائِدْ الْبَاطِنَةِ. Then this breaks to the breaking of the norms happen internally. So like رَفْعُ الْحُجَبِ الْغَفْلَةِ, there's a lifting of the veils of heedlessness. The hearts become pure. And then what happens is there's a lifting of the veil. And someone moves up internally in degrees of witnessing wonders from the higher realms and so forth and so on. And so he says that we have to be very careful though, because there are other categories of people that can have breaking of the norms happen of their hand and they're not beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So from here that we can mention, just in general, the different categories that I mentioned that we're going to talk about. The first is what's called a mu'jiza. And this is a miracle that happens on the hand of a prophet. Okay, it's called a mu'jiza, literally something that incapacitates. The Quran is inimitable. No one can reproduce the likes of it. And so the water coming from the blessed hand of our Prophet, this is a mu'jiza. And that's for prophets only. But it's a type of breaking of the norm. Then there's a type of breaking of the norm called an irhas. These are also for prophets, but before they become prophets. So like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was a cloud that used to follow him, to shade him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's a breaking of the norm. Then there's called a karama. A karama, as we mentioned, relates to this idea of nobility and ennobling. And this happens on the hands of the righteous of the ummah, people that have istiqamah, that break these norms. It's a karama. So the awliya have karamat. And it's wajib, it's an absolute obligation to believe that awliya can have karamat. If someone denies this, it's kufr, it takes them outside the fold of Islam, because it's mentioned in the Quran. Sayyidatina Maryam wasn't a prophet, right? وَهُزِّ إِلَيْكِ بِجِذْءِ النَّخْلَةِ تُسَاقَطْ عَلَيْكِ رُطَبًا جَنِيًّا. She's expecting and about to deliver. Can you shake a date palm? That on any, even the strongest of men can't shake a date palm and dates aren't going to fall. If she's delivering and shakes a date palm, how are that dates going to fall? This is a karama. This is a karama. That the story of the Prophet Solomon, where the man who had knowledge of the book brought the throne of Bilqis from Ma'rab in Yemen all the way to Philistine in the blink of an eye. How's that possible? It's possible by the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that certain people. Right, that's a karama. So we have to believe that in general, awliya can receive karamat on their hands. If you say it's not possible for a wali to receive a karama, that's actually could take someone outside the fold of Islam. Now, to believe that a specific karama actually happened on the hand of wali, that's not an obligation. It's an obligation to believe that karamat can happen on the hands of the righteous of the ummah. So then the fourth category was called a ma'una. So this is the idea of ma'una is assistance. It's possible there's a normal believer, they might be righteous, but not like the degree of wilayah, that Allah Ta'ala just breaks the norm for them. It's possible. Then there's, what's that category for? The fifth is what is called istidraj. And istidraj is where there's someone who's not righteous at all. They're impious, right? They're a profligate. Or they make claims, but the claims are not true. And there's breaking of the norms that happen on the hand, what they want. But it actually that leads them astray further. So the Dajjal, for instance, will that have connections with jinn, where he shows people that they think it's their forefathers, but it's just jinn taking their forms, right? That he'll bring someone back to life. He'll look up to the sky and tell the sky to rain. There's breaking of the norms that will happen on the hand of the Dajjal. But that doesn't mean that he's a person of truth. A'udhu billah. We know that increases us more. And he'll ask that person that he split up, which is the greatest shaheed, the one that he splits in half and kills and then brings him back to life. He says, do you believe now that? And he said, no, now I even know further because our Prophet informed us that you are the Dajjal. A'udhu billah. May Allah protect us. And then there's ways of preparing it. So just like now, we're like the way that they're now like pollinating the clouds and then like rain comes and these types of things, and that modern technologies, it seems to be like a type of sorcery. It seems magical to people. It seems like this is a sign that these people are on truth. So it's very, and that's a whole topic in of itself, but something we need to be very, very careful of. And it's only to get more. Look what AI is doing to people. Right? It's like, how is this possible? Like it's so mind-blowing. Right? That people, it's leading people astray. And these things are just going to increase. They're going to increase. Right? We never thought about AI when we were just talking about other things, several years ago. And there could be stuff after that, even more so. So the point here is that this is a category. It's called istidraj. Then it was called ihana. This is a breaking of the norms that happens on the hands of a profligate, right, or a disbeliever, which is the opposite of what they want to happen. So the classic example they mentioned there is Musaylim al-Kadhab. Someone came and asked him to pray for his eye, that he read on his eye, and his other eye that had a problem. Right, so it's the opposite of what they want. And then the last category, I think that's we're at 7 now, right, is magic. Here, not magic like the optical illusion type magic, the type of magic where is it someone has a connection with a'udhu billah, with the jinn, which is haram, and that it's considered to be a breaking of the norm. May Allah Ta'ala protect us and preserve us from that world, Ya Arhamur Rahmeen. And if someone does their awrad and believes in Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, they're protected from that. And if they're afflicted by it, it will just be very minor. And then there's people that can do the ruqya shar'iyah, read upon you with verses of the Quran or in a valid way from that's established in the sacred law, and khalas, that it will remove it. So these are the different breaking of the norms. So the whole point here is there's several categories there of people who are not beloved to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala that can have breaking of the norms happen at their hand. This is why the greatest sign of all is, what is our state? This is why Imam Junaid said, the great Imam, Sayyid al-Ta'ifa, is that if you see people flying through the air and walking on water, weigh their actions with the book and the sunnah. And if not people of istiqamah, of uprightness, leave them. Khalas. That could draw some people in, but khalas. So that if you see a yogi levitating or something like this, or you see if someone who's been given kind of a dhulmani type of what seems to be kashf but is not, right? From his connection to the beings of the unseen, be very careful. There's a lot of charlatans out there. And there's even charlatans that claim to be sheikhs of tasawwuf and this type of thing. And you got to be careful. You got to be careful. But the real people of tasawwuf are also there. And those are the ones that we want to connect to. And one of the greatest signs is that, and this is my personal advice, is to, that every sheikh must follow the Sharia. If you don't see people adhering to the sacred law and honoring the sacred law of Sayyidina Muhammad, is that my advice is distance yourself from. Have a good opinion. It's better to have a good opinion, unless you see something that there's no way to interpret it otherwise. The better, but if you don't, then have a good opinion, but khalas, be around people of the sacred law. Our approach to the haqiqah is through the Sharia, right? Everybody is bound by the Sharia in all instances. And the real shuyukh are the ones that are most scrupulous in the sacred law. They're most scrupulous in the sacred law in all of their interactions with the opposite gender, with financial transactions, and on everything else. They're the most scrupulous. And these are the people that we truly want to follow and be like. So he then goes on to say, فَكَيْفَ تَطْلُ أَيُّهَا الْمُرِيدُ, how can you, O seeker, that hope that there ever be norms that are broken on your hands and you've not broken the norms of your own self? And here, most importantly, is that how can we ever, which is what we want, to enter into the divine presence when we haven't broken the inner norms of our own self that are keeping us veiled? So our job is to break the norms, the ones of the outward realm and the ones of the inner realm. Is to break those norms. And then, from the bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, norms will be broken from us, but they're not sought for in of themselves. What we're seeking is ubudiyah. We're seeking to really establish our servitude to Allah. And if you say that we're really seeking anything, we're seeking closeness to Allah and knowledge of Him. That's really what we want, is to be close to Allah, is to become beloved to Allah, to love Allah, to witness Allah, to be close to Allah. That's what we want. That's what we long for. That's what we desire. And this is why that if Allah Ta'ala gives someone unveilings, they're considered to be veils of light. Veils of darkness, you turn away from. Veils of light, you travel through. And you don't let them, because someone might be so impressed, like so amazed of this unveiling, you forget, like, my goal is Allah. My goal is not this unveiling. That unveiling strengthens your certainty. That unveiling that serves a purpose, but it shouldn't distract you. What we want is Allah. What we want is ma'rifah, knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so there's a story that he'd previously mentioned, Sidi Ahmed ibn Ajib, then he mentions it again here, a part of it. And he says he spoke about the man who spent 30 years with Abu Yazid al-Bastami. And he still hadn't tasted what was supposed to be tasted in the spiritual path. And he says to him that after he said that, Yani, I've been with you for all these years. And he says that, would you two do this for 300 years? You're not going to ever taste what the people of this path taste. He says, لِأَنَّكَ مَحْجُوبٌ بِنَفْسِكَ, that you are veiled through your own self. You're veiled through your own self. And so he tells him to do something. Okay, and so he tells him to that go and shave your head and take off these nice clothes. Wear simple clothing and put like a little container around your neck and put some form of nuts in the container. And then go into the middle of the marketplace and call out to the children of the marketplace, anyone who slaps me, I'll give them one of these nuts. He says, go and make sure that the people that know you see you doing this. And his whole point here is that in general, this is not something you do in the sacred law, to humiliate yourself like this. But his whole point is that he knows the man wasn't going to do it. And what he was trying to teach him is that if you find that repulsive because of your desire for places in the hearts of people, how do you expect to ever know Allah Ta'ala? And so the whole purpose here is that not that the shuyukh of our time have us do things like this. They tend to in our time not to do things like this. It tends to be easier. They tend to be easier with us. But the meaning is still there. We have to rid these things of our heart. There's things that are veiling us. And there's people that might outwardly be worshipers. But if this is still in the heart, we're going to be veiled. And this is why one of the things that he eventually goes on to say at the end, and we'll mention a couple other quotes before we wrap it up, but we'll go to this now. He says, لا بد في خلق الأوائل الباطن من شيخ كامل جامع بين حقيقة والشريعة. Is that this is why that if you really want to break the inner norms of the spiritual world, you have to have a sheikh, you have to have a teacher who's complete, who joins between the haqiqah, the spiritualities, and the sharia, the sacred law, who carries you, يحملك بهمته, carries you with his aspiration. And he says, فإذا رميت يدك في نفسك حملتك الهمة ونصرك القدرة. That فقتلتها بالمرة. Is that you might be able to slaughter your soul, that if you use all of your aspiration. He says, but it's likely to come back to life. He says, but with the assistance of a sheikh who might not be with you outwardly, but you're benefiting from the connection in his aspiration. He said, this is the real way to slaughter the nafs. It's through the assistance of, and this is what people don't realize. This is why when people criticize this word madad and these types of things, that there's an internal support, there's a blessing, there's a strength that comes from being attached to the great people of Allah Ta'ala, and they're still here. On the face of this earth, they're still here. And there's a protection, and there's an assistance to do what it is that we need to do. And if you think about it, this is what the Sahaba had. They had Rasulullah. And through their interaction with Rasulullah, they were able to experience what they experienced. And likewise, every single generation. This is how it was with the Sahaba with the Messenger, the Tabi'een with the Sahaba, and every generation after that with the shuyukh of their generation, who represented the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and nurtured them the way that he nurtured the Sahaba. And this is the way that it will remain until the end of time. But this is why these meetings are so important. First of all, we shouldn't want there to be breaking of norms on our hands, right, outwardly. And as we mentioned, it's a test and really a fitna. What we should be focusing on are these internal states. We'll end with a couple quotes here that are of benefit. So the Shaykh Abul Mawahib radiallahu anhu says, من ادعى شهود الجمال قبل تأدبه بالجلال فارفضه فإنه دجال. So whoever claims that he's witnessing the beauty of Allah before that he's been made to have adab and he's been put in his place through jalal, through majestic manifestations of the divine decree, فارفضه, then reject that person because that person's a dajjal. Right? And so he said that ولا جلال, this is now Sidi Ahmed ibn Ajib's commentary on this, ولا جلال أعظم على الناس من خرق عوائدها. There's no jalal, there's no majesty greater that one experiences then having to try to break the norms of your own self. كالتبديل العز بالذل, is that the honor that you're normally seeking, that it be replaced with humiliation. والغنى بالفقر, and wealth with poverty. والجاه بالخمول, and status with remaining unknown, and so forth and so on. And so the whole point here is, we haven't gone into detail, different shuyukh have different techniques to help rid you and help rid us of these various meanings. And that there are different techniques, different shuyukh have different ways. But in general, the Ghazalian way of doing so is that learning about them and then struggling that against yourself under the guidance of a teacher. And this is why you have a Shaykh of Ta'aleem, a Shaykh who teaches you outward knowledge. But then you have a Shaykh of Tahdeeb that helps refine your character. And that's what we want, is to be around people that help us refine our character. And this world is a vast world. And once you start to have this open up for you internally, you start to realize, oh my goodness, after studying the basics of the deen, really what I need doing is studying like a book like Ihya al-Ulumuddin throughout my entire life. And this is why the great awliya always loved it. You keep studying outward knowledge. Outward knowledge is essential. It's important. And we need it for the work that we need to do here in the world. But you combine with that inward knowledge. And this is what we want, is to join between the two. Outward knowledge and inward knowledge, with spiritual struggle, working against ourselves under the guidance of a spiritual master who, that inshallah ta'ala, can be a means for us ultimately in the end to come to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is what we really want. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq and bless us in all of our affairs. Ya Arhamar Rahimeen. May Allah ta'ala assist us in breaking the norms of our soul, those that relate to the outward dimension and those that relate to the inward dimension. And may we belong to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, not belong to anything else. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us strength and to bless us in these last days of Sha'ban and to cause us to reach Ramadan and bless us to reach Ramadan. And may this be from the most blessed of Ramadans for us. Ya Arhamar Rahimeen. May Allah assist us in fasting and siyam, and assist us in standing in prayer and qiyam, assist us in recitation of the Quran. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala open up these meanings to be for us, Ya Allah. May they be realized in us in this blessed month, Ya Allah. And the spiritual gift that He bestows upon the elect of His creation this month, Ya Allah. We ask You that we have a great portion of that. Fi khayran wa lutfan wa afiyah. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.